Will Metroid Prime 4 break the Metroid curse? What I mean to ask is, will this game make $1 trillion? In case you didn't know already, Metroid is not one of Nintendo's most successful franchises. But can Metroid Prime 4 be the one to break the so-called Metroid curse? Well, some people have said it's already been broken with Metroid Dread, which sold over 3 million units, surpassing the previous record holder, Metroid Prime, which held on to that title for 19 years. But I want to know now, can Metroid Prime 4 be the game to break Dread's record, selling more than 3 million units? Heck, maybe even 4, 5, or 6 million. Because honestly, it would behoove Nintendo to ensure that this game succeeds. Truthfully, they should make sure all their games succeed, but Metroid Prime 4 is a special case, because this game was originally handled by a different developer, rumored to be Bandai Namco Singapore, but in 2019 they scrapped the work of that developer entirely and instead moved over to Retro Studios. They potentially scrapped millions of dollars worth of work from that old developer. So I'm sure Nintendo wants to make that money back and then some. Now, how can Nintendo ensure that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is a successful game? Well, right now, it seems to be in a pretty good spot. With Prime 4 coming out on the Switch, this system has a user base of over 140 million people, and the active user base has just gone up and up and up ever since it came out 7 years ago. It's why this game was never going to skip Switch in the first place, because you would be denying over 140 million people access to this highly anticipated game. I'm not saying all of them are going to buy Metroid Prime 4, but you can't ignore that user base. Especially now that they have been exposed to the Metroid brand with not just Metroid Dread, but also Metroid Prime Remastered, as well as the Metroid games on NSO. Not to mention, Metroid Dread and Prime Remastered are million-seller titles on the Switch. Like I said, Dread sold over 3 million copies. Metroid Prime Remastered sold less at 1.1 million copies, but that was roughly 2 months after the game came out. I would love to see an updated number of where those sales are at now, but that remains to be seen. Metroid has done well on the Switch, and it will surely do well when Prime 4 releases on it. It will also help that this game has been highly anticipated for 7 years since its announcement. 7 years of knowing literally nothing about the game except who's been working on it. That alone is going to help drive sales. If you don't believe me, look at Metroid Dread. Sure, it was released only a few months after the trailer, but ask any Metroid fan about Dread and they'll tell you the history behind it. This game wasn't necessarily announced by Nintendo 19 years before its release, but people knew it existed. It was heavily rumored, and the fact that the title Dread came up during that initial E3 reveal already sent cheers through the roof. People did not think this game was even going to be a reality, just a Half-Life 3 level meme that was going to last until the end of time, but when it became a real game, people's ears perked up, people's wallets came out, and they bought this thing, making it the most successful Metroid game. And we might see a similar level of success with Prime 4. Even before its announcement, people wanted a fourth Metroid Prime game, and when it was announced with just that logo, people like me screamed thunderous cries of joy. Sure, the hype mostly comes from seasoned Metroid fans, but I'm sure non-Metroid fans have been listening to the praise of this franchise and have thought, people are really excited for this Metroid Prime 4 kind of game. Let me look back and see what the Metroid series is known for, and they take a look, they buy Metroid Prime Remastered, maybe even Metroid Dread, and they think, okay, I understand it now. Now I'm excited for Metroid Prime 4. It just goes to show that hype is contagious, and seeing how excited people have gotten for Metroid Prime 4 over the past decade will only benefit this game's sales. That said, 7 years is a long time, and we're coming up on the end of the Switch life cycle, so that might also hurt the game, because now people are focused on the new thing, the next big console. Maybe that'll hurt the anticipation for Prime 4 because people only care about Switch 2 games, but even still, I think Metroid Prime 4 could serve as a great swan song for the Nintendo Switch, a console we all love dearly with the best library a Nintendo platform has ever had, and what a way to cap it off with a game as high quality as Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Of course, that means you still have to position the game correctly if it's going to launch on the Switch alone, at least at first. Ideally, this game would probably have to come out before the Switch 2 is even announced. Yes, we know there was that tweet from the president of Nintendo stating that we will get a Switch update between now and March 2025, but even still, that wasn't an official reveal of the console at all, so in that sense, the general public still doesn't know that the Switch successor is even a thing yet. So let's say Nintendo waits until the last possible minute to reveal the next console, so March 2025. Maybe Prime 4 could be a February release or an early March release, somewhere around that time. I'm not predicting that this is going to be the case, I'm just stating it as an example of how they could position this game for success, and that would be by launching it before the Switch 2 is even an idea in the general public's heads. That isn't to say a game can't succeed on one platform even if people know about the next platform. I think about the launch year of the PlayStation 5. That didn't stop Sony from releasing The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima on PlayStation 4. People already knew the PS5 was coming, but they still bought The Last of Us Part 2. Granted, that was already in a well-established franchise, but Ghost of Tsushima was a new IP, and it still sold like crazy. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 could be in a similar boat, releasing on the Switch months before the Switch 2 comes out, and then maybe later release a Switch 2 version. Even still, if the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, then Prime 4 is still going to be playable on that console. Maybe with some additional enhancements on the new platform, but that still remains to be seen on if that will even be an option on this console. Even still, what's to stop Nintendo from releasing like a dedicated Switch 2 version? Something like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Deluxe or Metroid Prime 4K Beyond HD. You can take that title, Nintendo, just give me royalties. Because again, this also happened with The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. They both got dedicated PS5 versions, even though the PS4 versions were enhanced on the new console. Of course, they were more than just mere remasters. They also came with additional modes. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut got that new island to explore with some new quests. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered got a new roguelite mode, but what also mattered is that the PS4 owners got an option to upgrade to these versions for a reduced cost. I feel like Metroid Prime 4 could have a similar strategy here. Release the game on Switch 1 first, and then when the Switch 2 comes out, release an enhanced version with new content, maybe new costumes, something to make it earn that deluxe title, if it has one even. But then there is another scenario, and I think we're all in agreement that there is going to be a Switch 2 version of this game one way or the other. But a common thing we've all heard is that the game is going to be a cross-gen release, meaning that it's going to be a Switch 2 launch title while also being on the Switch 1. And you know, there is a case to be made that this could really benefit the sales of Metroid Prime 4. Just the fact that a new console is coming out is very exciting to people, and they're more inclined to buy experiences that they wouldn't have otherwise given a shot if it wasn't for that new console. And Prime 4 could be that game. Somebody could be watching the Switch 2 reveal at home, and then they'll see this cool looking game with some space shooting and some beautiful 4K visuals, and then they might think, I think I want to pick this game up on my Switch 2. It looks like a really cool experience. Breath of the Wild might have gone through something similar as well. I don't know if there's any numbers to back this up, but that was the big Switch launch title, even though it also came out on Wii U. No doubt millions of people saw Breath of the Wild, a massive experience to play on a console that's not only a traditional home one, but also a handheld. I'm sure it was the go-to choice for millions of new Switch adopters, which surely made Breath of the Wild the best-selling Zelda game of all time. Maybe the same thing could happen to Prime 4. It becomes one of the must-have games to pick up on the Switch 2 day one, for months even. And as a result, the sales will steadily climb up, making it a certified sales success. However, there are a number of factors that made Breath of the Wild a great success that Metroid Prime 4 doesn't exactly have going for it. For one, Zelda's been a more popular franchise than Metroid, which brings me to something I brought up in my Metroid Prime 4 in 2024 video, which is aged really well at this point. Why would Nintendo launch a console with a new Metroid game when they could launch it with something like a new 3D Mario a new Mario Kart, maybe even a new Kirby game. They have a lot of franchises they can launch a new console with, so why would they bring Metroid into the conversation, especially if it's also launching on Switch 1? That's another thing. A game that's already on Switch 1 is immediately less enticing to pick up on Switch 2, because when you're promoting a new console, you want to promote the brand new experiences on it that you can't get elsewhere. And with Prime 4, it's already on Switch 1. Yeah, it'll look prettier on Switch 2, but I don't think they're going to just seriously overhaul the graphics and make it look like a completely different game. It'll still look like Prime 4, just a little prettier. Now, of course, the Switch 2 is going to launch with more than one game. You could theoretically have a new 3D Mario launch alongside Metroid Prime 4. I mean, you could, if you don't want Metroid Prime 4 to make money because people picked up the new 3D Mario instead of that. I know, different audiences, but I also know that there will be Nintendo fans who are going to go pick up the Switch 2 and only have a budget for one game. And when given the choice between those two, guess which one they're more likely going to pick. But what might be the biggest barrier for this being a successful Switch 2 launch title is that number 4. People are going to see that on the box and think, oh, I probably shouldn't pick this up until I play the first 3 games. Which just goes to show that regardless of how this game launches, be it cross-gen at launch or Switch 1 first, however that may be, Metroid Primes 2 and 3 have to be released on Switch first. Even if it's not necessary to know the stories of Primes 1, 2, and 3 before 4, there are going to be those people who want to play the first 3 before jumping into 4. And you have to appeal to those people by releasing the first 3 games. Prime 1 Remastered's already out on Switch, but Prime 2 and 3 remain in question. I gotta think that they're gonna do something like they did with Pikmin 1 and 2 before Pikmin 4 came out. Pikmin 3 was already on Switch, but like 2 or 3 weeks before Pikmin 4 came out, they released Pikmin 1 and 2 on Switch. And you know what happened to Pikmin 4? It became the best-selling game in the franchise. So I'm sure Nintendo wants to replicate something like that and release Prime 2 and 3 maybe a month max before Prime 4 comes out. As a result, they might not be as remastered as Metroid Prime 1 was. There's been rumors that this is to be the case. Prime 1 is the big boy remaster, as Jeff Grubb put it, with Prime 2 and 3 being more simplified remasters, and honestly, I'm okay with that, because I'm sure at the point Prime 2 and 3 come out, Prime 4 will be pretty close to its release, and it'll just be nice to revisit 2 and 3 on Switch. So out of all these options I listed, which one of these is the most likely scenario to make Metroid Prime 4 a financial success? And we'll define success by selling more than Metroid Dread. Out of all these, I gotta feel like releasing the Switch version first and then releasing a definitive edition on Switch 2 would be the best option. At first, I really did think that a cross-gen Switch 2 launch would be the most beneficial, but I feel like there's just too many distractions at that point. In this scenario, Metroid Prime 4 isn't going to be the only Switch 2 launch title. There's going to be other, frankly, bigger games that are going to launch on this system, and people are just more likely to pick up something like a new 3D Mario instead of Prime 4. I feel like the best case scenario is to release this game on Switch 1 first, before the Switch 2 launches, and then when the Switch 2 launches, or maybe even a few months after that, you announce Metroid Prime 4K Beyond HD Edition, thus giving the game new life on the Switch 2. People who missed out on the original Switch release are excited because they get to experience this game on a new console, and you know, Metroid fans like me will double dip. We will. It's what we do. We just can't control ourselves. Although it wouldn't surprise me if I'm wrong and Metroid Prime 4 is indeed a Switch 2 launch title. They're going to wait until that system comes out to release the game on both platforms. I just hope Nintendo does right by this game and they don't just bury it alongside the other Switch 2 launch titles. Now, I spent this whole video talking about the release strategy of Metroid Prime 4, but really what also matters, what matters more frankly, is the game itself. What is the game going to do to ensure that Metroid Prime 4 is a sales success? Now, we already see from the first trailer of this game that it's going to be a lot like the Metroid Prime trilogy, looks very similar, plays very similar. Although we still haven't seen too much of the game, it was still very much a tease. What more is this game going to have to make sure it's a sales success? I gotta think it being a strong visual showcase for not just the Switch 2, but the Switch 1 as well will help sell this game. People will see this trailer and think, hey, this is running on Switch? Okay, I gotta pick this game up to see if this is really how good this game looks. And before we even saw footage of this game, I've heard many arguments stating that in order for Metroid Prime to appeal to a wider audience, it has to go open world, which is a stance I am vehemently against, but that isn't to say the environments of the game don't have to be close to open world. There was a rumor a while ago that the game had maps that were not open world, but really vast, similar to Halo Infinite, which was not a purely open world game, but it had some very large environments, which Halo was not exactly known for at the time. So maybe in their advertising, if Nintendo pushes a sort of exploration focus into the game itself, that could pique fans of Zelda, and more specifically Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, into wanting to pick this game up. And this final point might be controversial, but you know, Sylux is in the game, and we first saw that dude in Metroid Prime Hunters, which makes me think maybe there could be a multiplayer component in there somewhere. These past few weeks, I've heard a lot of people bring up their memories of playing Metroid Prime Hunters with friends online, so maybe Nintendo could recapture some of that magic. Because not only would it help for nostalgia's sake, but it could also potentially help with sales. Friends might run into each other and say, hey man, you gotta pick up Metroid Prime 4 Beyond because it has a killer multiplayer component. We're gonna have so much fun with it. Go pick it up. That's something I could see possibly happen. Although given the franchise's history with multiplayer outside of Hunters, it also wouldn't surprise me if they just focus on the single player component, which, hey, I'd be fine with that, honestly. But again, if they could make a really good multiplayer mode that's separate from the single player mode, then maybe that could be some points in the game's favor. But that's all I have for you today. In the meantime, I want to hear from you. How do you think Nintendo could ensure Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is a sales success for the franchise? Sound off in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain and hit that notification bell to stay notified on all things Metroid. Until next time, bye-bye.